Good day, everybody. And I do intentionally use the word day here, as what I want to discuss with you is when is a day not a day, and how does the measurement of time affect us in our discussions about apologetics and COSM 500. About 3 years ago, I did a study on the book of Job with a group from our church Sunday school, and we got deep into the text and the scriptures, and time was a big element within our discussions, mainly because we were trying to understand time, earth time versus God time, as and how it affects pain and suffering. And a lot of that same conversation is applicable to what we have been discussing here lately. So I will pull up some older information that I have created over time and share it with you and have this discussion about what is a day. One common element that I discovered when working on the study of Job and then also on our COSM 500 program this summer is the element of time in itself. I'm an engineer, and as an engineer, I've studied a lot over the years. I've tried to understand how science and religion can coexist peacefully, so to speak. And I've read a lot of things on apologetics, and a lot of my research back in 2020 took me to Hugh Ross and the Reason to Believe organization. And I learned a lot about a lot of the topics that we have focused on and applied it to the book of Job. And so that we could maybe understand Earth time a little bit better and how Earth time is nothing when you compare it to God time and how He measures time. The more I read, the more I realized that the dimension of time and the rate or the duration of time can play a major role in all of these discussions. And now I've learned how to use that to have these meaningful conversations with STEM people and how to understand time and how it could impact or understand a lot of the scriptures in the Bible itself. With that being said, trying to understand the time or duration of the creation in Genesis chapter 1 alone is a powerful debate. There's a lot of people that have taken some very firm positions on both sides of the aisle, and this study doesn't necessarily make a right or wrong argument with any of these people, but I think it does give non-believers or people that are questioning faith at least an alternative way that they can understand and maybe make that connection in the hopes that they can wrangle their way through this topic. And so before I dive into it too much, I do want to share some of the data that I compiled during my Job study and how that relates to earth time versus God time. One of the first things that I discovered a little bit was the age of man varied over time. If you look through Genesis, and even when you get into chapter 6, there was a couple of passages in there about how God maybe questioned man in his time on earth and how long he was being exposed to evil and sin. In the early part of the Old Testament, many of the protagonists all lived to the ripe old ages in the 800 to 900 time frame. And it was only after the global flood that God slowly over time reduced the age of man to various until you get about to Solomon, where he actually his time on earth was down to 58 years. That length of age kind of stayed the same for many years until modern science and living through chemistry and everything has extended people's lives to where now it is not uncommon for people to live to the age of 100 and some a little higher, but definitely not anywhere close to what Noah and a lot of his predecessors lived to. So, again, in chapter 6, That may be the only place in the Bible where God admits that things were not as he had intended. He goes as far as stating, this is Genesis chapter 6, he goes as far as stating that he's sorry that he had made man on earth. Now, that's a powerful statement right there and alone, but it can kind of give you some ideas about why God made some changes. He didn't change the physics or anything, but he just changed the length of life that man happened, where he could have messed with the physics, he could have accelerated time, he could have accelerated life in itself. There's a lot of young earth people that think that that is exactly how he created the earth, that he accelerated the earth, as opposed to just letting it occurring naturally. And the reason why he was thinking this is that the earth was becoming very corrupt and filled with violence. And this was one time where he set out to destroy all of man except for Noah and his family. And one blog that I read even suggested that man's inventions and materialism assisted in his turning away from God. And today, I would say that's unequivocally a true statement. I mean, no more has the internet and social media and ways to view different things and stuff has turned so many people away from the church and away from God. I kind of buy into that blogger's argument that man is kind of his own worst enemy, and it's led to his downfall in so many ways. As I mentioned before, after the flood, God gradually reduced the age of man until it was about 58 years for Solomon, and stayed very, very similar to that until today, where we live to be the average age of 100. So what I want to talk about a little bit is about earth time versus God time. There is earth time that we experience as mortals here on earth, and then there's God time. And if you think about it, God not only will live for eternity, but he was here before eternity as well. So it's infinite in both directions in time, before and after. And today, our knowledge base has expanded the definition of the word day, or it has entrenched the definition of word day into our minds. And many minds or people just can't shake that. They are so hooked on the word day that it's only a 24-hour period, total, no argument. And so I started thinking, okay, who are the people that find a lot of importance in the word day? Well, attorneys, of course, attorneys and anyone involved in contracts. I mentioned that I'm involved in engineering, so our contracts are usually written that a contractor has to be done in 90 calendar days or 90 working days. We don't get into hours. We leave it up to contractors to determine how long they want to work, but that is we give them a beginning and an ending date, or events, as I'll say. And of course, attorneys get involved when either they don't meet the calendar or contract, or other things have occurred. Somebody else who might think that the counting of days is important is prisoners. You know, if a prisoner is in jail for 120 days, he'll be sitting there putting those scratch marks on the walls of his cell, counting those days until he can be released. Perhaps someone else that might be interested in counting days is somebody with a critical illness. Um, Somebody that might have been given 3 months to live celebrates when they start hitting 92, 93, 95 days. I mean, they are counting days because they know something is heading their way. Uh, some of the most recent arguments that I've learned about are people that count days and ensure that a day means 24 hours. Is pretty much anybody that argues against the old earth concept. The young earth concept people, they place all of their beliefs and everything on a 24-hour day. And atheists as well, if they just do not want to believe, they pull up the Bible and turn to chapter 1 and say, it says here God created the earth in 6 days, and science and history and everything else tells me different. But what I want to point out here is, what do all of these people have in common? Well, they're all earthlings. They are entirely basing their arguments, their different things, on the concept of time, uh, using earth time. They are not at all thinking about godly time at all. Albert Einstein said time is relative. In other words, the rate at which time passes depends upon your frame of reference. Um, Time is relative. I've figured out that time is relative to what kind of a creature you are. If you were a mayfly has a 24-hour lifespan. Um, it has 24 hours in which it needs to find another mayfly, breed, pass on so that the next generation lives, and then it dies. A mayfly may never experience a season. It may never experience a sunrise or a sunset, depending on when that time happens. So, to a mayfly, a day means everything. So, on the other extreme, there are black coral in several seas and oceans that have been documented to live more than 4,300 years old. But to a black coral, who's stuck in the same spot, never moves, never experiences anything but waves and salt water and fish, um, maybe time to them, it could be pain and suffering for the coral, because he's like, how long is this going to last? And the other thing I thought about is time is relative to one's location. Um, let's think of the cosmos, the planets and the galaxy and everything. Um, we're equating 24 hours on Earth, because as a day, because that is defined by one rotation of the Earth on its axis. And that's been measured to be exactly 23.94 hours for a day. That's why we do have daylight savings time and we have to make changes along the way. But that's Earth time. Again, that's strictly Earth time. So, what about other locations in the solar system? How do they measure time and so on? So, I looked that up, and there are a lot of variances in the solar system, and the time in which many of the planets, or if you want to call Pluto a star, I'm old school. I was always learned that Pluto was a planet until a few years ago. But some of these planets spin much faster than Earth, some spin much slower than Earth. So a day on any of those planets are measured quite a bit differently. And if you've ever watched any of the movies about Mars, they don't call them days, they call them sols, SOLS. So they even measure Mars a little bit different, even though it's very close. Mars is 24.6 hours, but Mercury is 58.65 days. So think about that as Mars or Mercury is spinning around its axis, you're going to have 29 days of darkness and 29 days of sunshine. Venus, which has the slowest spinning of all the planets, is 243 days. So a sun up to a sunset, back to a sun up, is almost a year to us. So if we were actually positioned on Venus, we would think of time or Earth time or Venus time in a completely different light. But again, it's all subject to where you're at. Jupiter probably has one of the fastest spinning planets. It turns 9.8 hours. So in the time we have one sun up, one sun down, they have a little more than two. So again, time is relative to location as well as who you are and where you are. So is time relative to God? The thoughts I came up with that is that God is omnipresent. God is everywhere. He does not have an XYZ geoposition coordinate where he is. But let's hypothetically for a minute, let's think if he did. What if God literally hovered over the solar system and looked down on everything? Does God have a day and a night? He's not rotating. The sun is always on. It's like the light and it's been left on for eternity. So by that term, God probably does not measure time in a sunset, sunrise situation. So is it reasonable to think that God would think of a day being 24 hours long? Um, we know that God separated the day from the night for Earth. Naturally, it's obvious that He separated the day from the night for all of the planets that rotate. If there was any that didn't rotate at all, they would either be day or night, depending on which part of the globe you're on. But God does not experience day and night the same way we do. So now we really need to get into the word for the Hebrew word that's measuring these various periods of time. And the Hebrew word yom can indicate, some have 6 definitions, some have 4, some have 2, depending on their belief systems. But a lot of them, I believe, agree that the Hebrew word yom can have at least 4 definitions, partly because the Hebrew language at the time only had about 3,300 words, where we have many, many thousands of words in the English language. So the same word could have multiple meanings in Hebrew. And of the 4 definitions that are most commonly accepted, the word yom can mean part of the daylight hours. It could mean all of the daylight hours. It could mean a 24-hour period. But one of the ones that are most challenged is a lot of people believe that yom can also mean a long but finite period of time. So that could be eons, millions of years, billions of years. The word yom uh, could mean any or all of those different things. Some of the things God did, he could have done it in 24-hour period, and the truth is, he could have done it with the snap of his finger. Some people argue that if you minimize God's creation and His power, that He took billions of years to create the earth, that you're minimizing His glory. Quite frankly, I argue the opposite. And we'll talk about that some more. But I will ask, of those definitions for the word yom, which of these is the most logical measure of time for God? And I think a lot of it has to be, if you believe in science, if you believe in dating of rocks and different carbon dating type procedures and that kind of stuff. If God did start the Big Bang under His own power, and He did allow the Earth to form over billions of years instead of 24 hours, does that make His creation any less majestic? And again, I say no, it doesn't, because you only have to look at the earth and its majesty and everything, and all of the creatures that are on it, and the weather and the science, and how animals and leaves and stuff turned into petroleum products and things like that. And all of that was planned. It didn't just happen by accident that God made a mistake and created oil. But anyway, our calculation of time, this was a quote by Melissa Henderson that I found in some of my research. She said, our calculation of time is not the same as how God defines time. And I completely believe that. And she also said that scholars and historians have debated whether or not God uses the planets to record time. Um, in the interest of shortening up this quote, she also said that historians have researched about how God may have created years, months, weeks, days, minutes, seconds, seasons, and so on. But and said while we can question and research how God thinks about topics like time, he's the only one that really knows the answer. And I think my pastor said it best when I talked to him about this. And he said, you know what? He said, when we all go to heaven, he said, and we ask God this question, we might find out that we're all wrong. So again, we're spending a lot of time and energy arguing about who's right and who's wrong, when it could be quite possible that none of us have got it right. So, with that being said, I did look up a few scriptures. There are many more, but here are some of the ones that kind of really help you understand the thought process. These are all God breathed scriptures. Second Peter chapter 3, verse 8 says, "But do not overlook this one fact, beloved, that with the Lord 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as 1 day." If there was not a more better broad description of earth time versus God time, I don't think I've seen it. But he does mention that um, it's very similar, but it could be longer than, and when you compare it. Ecclesiastes 3:11 also said, "He has made everything beautiful in its time." In its time could be earth time. He could have done it. Um, a billion years could be a blink of God's eye for all we know. He could have snapped his fingers and a billion years passed because God time is not measured in the same as earth time. But the scripture goes on to say, He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. So we're trying to assume we know everything that happened from day one to what will happen when Revelation hits. But again, like Pastor Chad says, we don't have a clue, and until we do, I'll have an example here in a minute of what you think might be eternity. But I want you to experience what my thoughts are on that as well too. Lastly, Psalms chapter 90, verse 4 says, "For 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday when it is past, or as a watch in the night." And that particular scripture right there is basically saying 1,000 years of God time can pass uh, while you're asleep. A watch in the night, you don't even see the watchmen. The watchmen were usually on for 3 hours, 4 hours at a time. You didn't even see them pass, but in godly time, that could have been 1,000 years that passed, and you just didn't know it. So now I want to here is the part that came from my Job study. And this was called a perspective of time. And as you might be able to figure out, this was done during COVID. And toilet paper was very precious at that time. There was very much a shortage of it. So I thought, what could be a most common household item that could be used to illustrate time? And so I just assumed that one roll of toilet paper was equal to 1,000,000 years. And I don't want to tell you all of this, but I actually read the label on the toilet paper, figured out its length and its width, and what percentage of that or it would take, and literally it was almost down to like centimeters, that a roll of toilet paper is about 1,000,000 centimeters. So 1,000,000 years for a roll of toilet paper was a pretty good measurement of time. So now let's think about our average mortal life on Earth. If a roll of toilet paper is 1,000,000 years, that little square right there represents 100 years. That is our time that we hope to live on this earth. If we get additional years, great. If we don't reach 100 years, well, that's because that was not in God's plan for us. But this right here gives you a perspective of our life on earth versus a million years. So let's take this one step further. Who was probably, other than God and the angels and the Nephilim and so on, who was probably the first person that was on mortal earth to go to heaven? And the answer, of course, is Abel. Cain slew Abel, which was the first recorded death in the Bible. So, how long has Abel been in heaven? This right here is a measurement of 6,000 years on that million-year roll of toilet paper. So, you know, a lot of people might feel like, well, Abel's been in heaven for eternity. He's not even close. Again, he's just a blink of the eye in God time, but it's been 6,000 years of earth time. And of course, a lot of people think that 6,000 years is the age of the young earth. Um, but again, I still argue that old earth theories are reasonable to consider. And therefore, um, I tried to equate this a few steps further. Is this eternity? Is 72 million years an eternity? Abel's been in heaven for 6,000 years and probably can't remember any pain or suffering that he ever experienced on earth. But 72 million years is still not, that is still very young if you go look at rocks and mountains and things that are on the earth. So is this eternity? Maybe this right here is 1,000 rolls of toilet paper. Maybe this is a billion years right here. What is that little speck on that one little square of toilet paper compared to all the toilet paper on these store shelves? Again, it's less than a blink of an eye now at this point. But still, the Earth is believed to be older than a billion years. The Earth is believed to be a little over 4 billion years. So even if we doubled that or tripled that, now this could be eternity. We don't know how deep these shelves are going back in this warehouse, but that is a lot of toilet paper and a lot of each roll representing a million years. This could easily be 10, 15, 20 billion years. And again, that little speck that you saw on that toilet paper is really difficult to compare with eternity. So I tell you this, there's no comparison. Mortal life or earth time is versus eternal life in God time is is immeasurable and cannot really be compared at the end of the day. And Melissa Henderson made this statement too. Time is measured in different ways, yet the event's impacts can be more important than the actual time. So, so what is it important whether he built the earth in 6 24-hour days or he did it in 4.3 billion years? Isn't the fact that the earth is created and it's there today, isn't the event more important than the time it took? I mean, we didn't even have a way to measure time until somebody made a watch. Yeah, we can measure with a sundial or with the seasons and things like that, but measuring time, really, God doesn't use Outlook. He doesn't have a smartwatch. He doesn't compare uh, time and when is something due like we do here on Earth. So I think it's very important that we think more about the events. I read a few other blogs and studies and stuff that the day of the Lord, there's not entirely complete disagreement about the day of the Lord. Some think that the day of the Lord will be a long period or an extended period of apocalyptic times. and the end of the earth and suffering and getting rid of evil. Others think it'll happen just like the Big Bang, that with a snap of the fingers, everybody that's bad disappears, everybody that's good goes to heaven, and the day of the Lord will be instantaneous. But again, that's still not 24 hours, but they still call it the day of the Lord. So again, um, I'd now like to end this discussion. I would open the floor. I do publish these on YouTube. You can find my studies by looking for Ken Ross, and I think you'll find it. If anybody would like to email me to discuss this further, continue this discussion, I would be happy to do so. And again, God bless you all, and I appreciate this opportunity to share my thoughts. Again, um, we could all be wrong. We could all be right. God could have still accelerated 4.3 billion years and compressed it down to 6 days. So again, I'm not sweating the small stuff, so to speak, because the ultimate goal here is to find believers, bring people to Christ, and give them the same opportunity that we all believe we have in our salvation with Jesus Christ. God bless you all, and thank you very much.